In the first video of this series, I talked about 8 common functions in General Training Task 1. If you watch that video, you know a letter might ask you to explain, to request, to describe, etc., etc. Certain functions keep repeating in Task 1 General Training, and we learned them in that lesson. Now, in this lesson, we'll look at useful phrases for 4 of the most common and most important functions: requesting, explaining, asking for help, and inviting. I'll show you what these phrases mean, when to use them, how to choose the phrase that has the right tone for the letter, and where each phrase fits best inside your letter. By the end of this lesson, you'll have a small bank of useful expressions you can actually use in your own general training letters. By the way, put the video on pause and download the free handout for this lesson. It helps to have it in front of you while you're listening to me. It would be great if you could print it out and read it and write while watching. The link is in the description of this video. Requesting is one of the most common functions in General Training Task 1. Very often, you're writing because you want something from the reader. You want information, you want permission, you want help, action, etc. A very useful phrase for the opening line of your letter is, I'm writing to request. For example, you might write, I'm writing to request 5 days off work next month. This sentence is formal and direct. Another useful opening phrase, especially when you want information, is I'm writing to inquire about. Inquire means ask. For example, I'm writing to inquire about the English course starting in July. This is also formal and it works very well in the opening line of a formal letter. Another very useful phrase, usually for the body of the letter, is could you please? For example, could you please send me information about the course? This is one of the safest request phrases in Task 1. It's polite, natural, and could be used in both formal and semi-formal letters. A slightly more formal version, also used in the body of the letter, is I would appreciate it if you could. For example, I would appreciate it if you could confirm the starting date of the course. This one sounds more formal and more professional. And one more useful phrase, again, usually for the body of your letter, is I would like to know whether. For example, I would like to know whether accommodation is included in the package. This one is useful when you want to ask for a specific piece of information. And one more useful phrase, which works especially well in a semi-formal letter, is I was wondering if you could. For example, I was wondering if you could help me find a part-time job while I'm studying there. This one sounds softer and more personal. So it works well in semi-formal letters, which is when you're writing to someone you know. By the way, it's very important to understand the 3 tones of your General Training Task 1 letter. And if you're not 100% clear on what those 3 tones are and how you can achieve them in your letter, you can go watch my video. It's quite important. This function appears in many Task 1 letters. Because even when the main purpose of the letter is something else, you still usually need to explain the situation. You may need to explain why you're writing, what happened, and what your situation is, or give some background details. A very common phrase for the opening line of your letter is, I'm writing to inform you that. For example, I'm writing to inform you that I have recently moved to a new apartment. This is a formal phrase, and it's very useful when you need to give information directly. Another useful phrase which can work in the opening or in the body of your letter is I'm writing with reference to. For example, I'm writing with reference to your advertisement for the part-time position published last week. This one is formal and it works best in the opening line of the letter. Another good phrase, usually in the opening part, when you want to make your purpose clear, is the reason I'm writing is that. Simple, right? For example, the reason I'm writing is that I need to explain a change in my plans. And another phrase which can work in the opening line or in the body is I would like to let you know. For example, I would like to let you know that I will be arriving 2 days later than planned. This one is a little softer and less formal, so it can work well in semi-formal letters. Now let's move on to the third function, which is asking for help. This function is close to requesting, but it's not exactly the same. When you request, you usually ask for information, or permission, or for action. When you ask for help, you're asking someone to support you in some way. This function is very common in semi-formal and informal letters. And a very useful phrase which can work in the opening or in the body of your letter is, I was wondering if you could help me. For example, I was wondering if you could help me find a part-time job while I'm studying there. Another useful phrase, usually for the body of the letter, is could you help me with? For example, could you help me with finding a place to stay for the first few days? Simple and direct, but still polite. And another good phrase also in the body is I would really appreciate your help with. For example, I would really appreciate your help with this matter. This one sounds warm and personal, so it works well when you're writing to someone you know, which means in an informal or a semi-formal letter. You can also say, usually in the body or near the end of the letter, if you could help me, da da da, I would be grateful. For example, if you could help me contact a local employer, I would be very grateful. This sounds polite and a little more formal. Another useful phrase is I would be grateful for any help you can offer. Da, da, da. For example, I would be grateful for any help you can offer in finding accommodation. And another phrase close to that one would be I would appreciate any help you could give me in finding accommodation. So all these phrases do the same basic job. They ask the reader for support. Some of them sound more personal, some of them sound more formal. Now let's move on to the next function, which is inviting. Inviting is another function that happens in General Training Task 1, especially in semi-formal and informal letters. In these tasks, you may need to invite someone to visit you, to stay with you, to come to an event, or to join you for something. A very natural phrase is, I'd love you to. For example, I'd love you to come and stay with me for a few days. This sounds warm and friendly. Or I'd like to invite you to. For example, I'd like to invite you to my graduation party next Saturday. This one can work well in both informal and semi-formal letters. And another common phrase is, I was wondering if you'd like to. For example, I was wondering if you'd like to join us for dinner on Friday. This phrase sounds a little more polite, so it works well when you want to sound friendly, but not too direct. You can also say, why don't you? Which is probably very informal. For example, why don't you come and stay with us during the holidays? This one is very friendly and works best in informal letters. And one more useful phrase, usually when you want to sound warm and welcoming, is it would be great if you could. For example, it would be great if you could come to the wedding in June. Or I hope you'll be able to come to the wedding in June. Warm, friendly, and very natural near the end of an invitation. Now imagine the task says you're going abroad to study. Write to a friend and explain your situation. Ask for help finding a part-time job. Pause the video and in your handout, if you printed it out, or on a piece of paper, try to write 2 sentences for the beginning of this letter. Then come back and compare your sentences with mine. Here's a possible answer. I'm writing to let you know that I'll be moving to Toronto next month to begin my studies. I was wondering if you could help me find a part-time job while I'm there. Let's look at one more prompt. The task says, you have recently moved to a new town for work. Write to your former teacher and describe your new situation. Invite him or her to visit you. All right, pause the video and write 2 sentences and come back and compare with what I wrote. Here's my sentences. I've recently moved to Kelowna for a new job. I would like to invite you to come and visit me sometime this summer. So again, the important thing is this. You look at the bullet points, identify the functions, and then choose the phrases that fit. All right, in this lesson, we looked at some very useful phrases for requesting, explaining, asking for help, and inviting. In the next lesson, we'll look at useful phrases for the other 4 main functions: complaining, apologizing, applying, and suggesting. If this lesson helped you, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next one.